Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is the first in the magic series, and I'm going to be talking about sympathetic magic. And the reason why I wanted that to be the first one is it's incredibly universal. I would even argue that there's an instinctive component to sympathetic magic. I almost said parasympathetic. I'm in biology mode. One example, well, actually, let me start with a definition. So, sympathetic magic, what you're doing is you're engaging in a practice wherein an object or a diagram or something, one thing, stands in as a substitution for something else. And I can think of no better instance of this than effigies, both for good or bad. Voodoo dolls, definitely a form of sympathetic magic, but less thought about would be idols. Idol worship is absolutely a form of sympathetic magic. Because what you're doing is you're substituting a wooden or ivory or whatever metal figure in for a more abstract, in most accounts. I mean, there are plenty of mythologies where the gods are made out of flesh and blood, but you're using an object as a substitution for the deity themselves. They're standing in for the deity. That would absolutely be a form of sympathetic magic. Voodoo dolls, again, very classic example. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, because there's a million videos about things of that sort, about, instances of voodoo and instances of Wicca and all that, sympathetic magic. But I wanted to call attention to what I think is the most universal, common, and practiced form of sympathetic magic that people probably don't think about, and that would be the written word. Think about it. Like you're sending somebody a message in order to manifest an outcome. You send somebody an email, for example, hey, we're meeting Thursday at 4 o'clock at insert coffee shop. And then they show up at the coffee shop. Now you might say, well, yeah, that's because it's a form of communication. And yeah, the legwork, 99% of what just happened, is not magic, it's communication. But you're instilling a mental association with a series of symbols in order to convey an idea to another person who also understands those series of symbols. In other words, the words, as they're written, are substitutions for these abstract thoughts that you have, and you're using that as a means of communication. So I would argue that writing or spelling, and that's not a coincidence, is a form of sympathetic magic. In fact, I would even argue that we live in an era where sympathetic magic is the norm in terms of how we think, because we're taught to spell at a very early age. In societies where the written word doesn't exist, the concepts take precedence mentally, whereas in places like the modern era where the written word is taught from an early age, myself included, we often think in words and in spellings. So it's an odd thing because it's so mundane and normal for us that we don't see it as a magical act, and yet that's absolutely what we're doing. We're substituting one thing for another, and you see this big time in pre-industrial societies, actually more so in pre-civilized societies, where there is a connotation of spirituality and of magical practice with the written word. A perfect example would be the Germanic and Norse traditions, where runes are something of profound magical importance, not just a means of, writing grandma and telling her that you're having fun at the beach. But that's exactly what we think of when we think of written words. We think of emails and flyers and brochures and postcards and things of that sort. And as somebody whose background comes from writing marketing content, the magical component is something that I see every day. I can think of fewer examples than got milk. It's 2 words, but they're spelled out in every single instance. It's never just vocalized. And those 2 words saved an entire industry. The dairy industry was collapsing, largely because people were associating fat as a negative thing in the 90s and whatnot. And lo and behold, some marketer came up with got milk, and it was just 2 words, but it saved the whole industry. And I do mean that. There are unironically tens, well, let's say hundreds to thousands, probably not tens of thousands, but that number of cattle farmers who had dairy farms for generations who would have gone under and had to seek work elsewhere if it were not for those 2 spelled out words. So that's what I mean when I say sympathetic magic. You're substituting something for something else. And it's almost instinctive. Like I said, it might even be instinctive. I can think of fewer examples more profound, at least from the instinctive perspective that I'm putting forth, than with small children and certain associations they have. I think I've mentioned this in a previous video. You know, a child wants a red bicycle because it goes faster than a blue one. That doesn't make sense from a materialistic perspective, does it? And if you were to test it, no, it doesn't go faster. So why would a child think a red bicycle would go faster than a blue one? Well, if you look at the actual frequency of light waves that are red and blue, there's a vast difference in the actual wavelength difference. Could be because we associate red with animated things. Blood is red, the sun is quasi-red, it's a warm color. There's all sorts of possible explanations for why. Same thing with a wagon. Kid is pulling a little wagon along, they might put a flame sticker on the side so it'll go faster. That's sympathetic magic, you know. Fire is associated with combustion, and combustion is fast. So putting a flame sticker on the wagon, well, surely that would make it run faster, right? That's sympathetic magic. That's the association of one thing and the attributes that we associate with that one thing, and then applying it in a very different and non-logical, non-materialistic kind of fashion. That's another example of it. You even see plenty of it. You know, a lot of times people think of what I've described, especially with effigies and deities, as being particularly pagan, but Christianity has a lot of it too. The cross itself is venerated, even if it's not deified. It's venerated as a symbol associated with the crucifixion and with Christ's sacrifice. And I highly encourage people to read Dream of the Rood. Rood is an archaic term for cross, and it's a very interesting poem wherein everything is told from the cross's perspective, and it portrays Christ as a warrior who's actively taking on the mantle of crucifixion, and the Rood is a living being telling the story and helping him to be crucified for that noble purpose, which is, it's a very interesting take on it. And I'm not sure if the reason behind it was just to convert pagans who had that warrior mindset, or if they were being sincere, the person who wrote it. I'll leave that open to interpretation, because this is the copy-outist of all cop-outs, but I wasn't there, so I don't want to judge the person's intentions who was involved in that, even though it's a very divisive topic. But Dream of the Rood, fascinating poem, and a great example of Christian sympathetic magic, because you actually have this cross not just being venerated as a symbol, but actually being venerated as a living being, and in some ways a deity unto itself that assisted with the redemption of humanity via the crucifixion. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, that covers sympathetic magic. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.